A very good afternoon to everyone who's joined us for the session. Good morning and good evening to people from across the world. So thanks so much for joining another LeadSquared webinar. As usual, I'm your host Shibani Roy. I work for the marketing team at LeadSquared, and some of you may have received a lot of emails from me, so I hope you don't mind that. But thanks so much again for joining in. The session today is all about sales transformation. That's the thing we've seen. It's almost a trend that we've been seeing this year. And so we thought of, having a really insightful session to end this year. So I hope you find it useful. And of course, if you have questions, as always, we'll take them at the end. So don't forget to put that on the chat box. Let me just give you a quick brief about what we'll be talking about today. It's all about transformation, sales transformation practice with LeadSquared. We'll be discussing how sales processes are transforming in the digital world, how to accelerate growth and customer acquisition. We'll be discussing some stories from tech, BFSI healthcare, and of course, how can you build a sales transformation practice around LeadSquared? So the person who's going to take us through this session is none other than Malay Shah. He is the Chief Growth Officer at LeadSquared. Malay, if you could please share a few lines about yourself, your experiences in this domain, and take the session forward.
Thank you so much, Shibani. Appreciate this warm introduction, and very warm welcome to everyone. A very good afternoon to you, to folks who are joining from India, as well as good morning, good evening if you're joining in from other time zones as well. So the topic, as Shibani mentioned today, is focused on how can you build a sales transformation practice around LeadSquared, and the session largely is targeted for both our customers, clients, who are grappling with a number of disruptions or changes within their business environment and trying to accelerate their growth in the respective industries, in some cases potentially even disrupting their specific industry vertical. At the same time, this session is also intended towards our partners as well, which basically is a community of system integrators, advisory firms, who are looking at not only providing advice but also driving a practice around a technology-led a tool or technology-led transformation as well. So with that, let me jump into the topic and let me also introduce LeadSquared for those who might not be familiar with. So LeadSquared is again one of the India's fastest growing software as a service company. We just got awarded Deloitte Fast 50 award as recent as early part of this week. And we have been doing this 5 years in a row. So while our product obviously focuses on helping clients in their sales transformation, I think we are also doing potentially something unique in terms of leveraging our own product suite and also implementing some of the best practices ourselves. In the broader industry, it's called dog fooding, but we will potentially not call that as a term, but it's largely leveraging the best practices for our own sake as well. So we'll also bring in some of the examples in terms of what we are doing as well as part of enabling sales transformation, for ourselves as well as for clients, and then also enabling our partner community to do that, for our end customers as well. So a very quick overview in terms of the topic for and the agenda for the day. So we will quickly talk about sales transformation and our take on the definition. I mean, obviously, transformation and disruptions has been buzzword or the keyword, but at the same time also highly abused word, if I were to say that, in 2019. So we will and then there is no one size fits all definition, but we will try to provide how we view sales transformation and all the components around sales transformation. And more specifically, within sales transformation, we will deep dive into 3 or 4 key areas. And we will also talk about how we are enabling our clients to drive transformation in those respective components. What we will just one quick point I just forgot to mention is we will hold off on the questions till about 45 minutes on the clock, and I'll open up the floor at about 3:45 India time, and you can ask those questions again on the platform, and Shibani can read aloud, and so we will have enough time for Q&A as well. We will try to make this as interactive as possible, and also get your perspectives on sales transformation. So let me move on to slide number 2, and this is again a quick view in terms of especially if I were to use the word disruption, how some of the industries that we are touching on a day-to-day basis as consumer is rapidly transforming, largely driven by digital trends. And at the heart of it, I mean, whether you talk about write about as an early learner starts learning, whether it's in K-12 or whether you are talking about young millennials, who are leveraging digital to the fullest extent possible in terms of managing their day-to-day life, whether it is coming to work, whether it is ordering food, whether it's traveling, or you talk about even some of the Gen X, Gen Y generation, who are leveraging multiple financial services again on digital, to potentially even the baby boomer generation who is leveraging digital from a health and managing health across multiple channels in their life cycle. So if you were to view this as a life cycle, I think it's very important that to understand that at the heart of it, there are 3 broader trends which are really driving the transformation and disruption. So the first important trend that we want to talk about is the customer experience across multiple channels, and how customer experience is playing a very important role in whether within your own internal organization or for your client organization, in terms of in creating and compelling experiences for your end customer. The second piece is the sales effectiveness. And sorry for using the acronyms over here, but the sales effectiveness is again becoming an important role, because no longer the sales channels for any of these organizations that you see over here, which are largely digital native organization, are leveraging only the traditional channels, which are which are either direct sales or partner-led sales, but they are also leveraging multiple digital channels for their sales and outreach to their customer, as well as also leveraging some of the inside sales within the organization, and obviously heavily leveraging marketing as well. So we'll talk about that as a second core part of the entire sales transformation. And the third piece is at the end of the day, what really matters is the growth and the customer acquisition that you are able to drive, whether it is in B2C environment or B2B environment. So the third thing that we want to talk about is managing performance, because that's the most critical layer when you talk about sales transformation. And more often than not, I mean, you would start out by defining what performance objectives you want to really achieve in terms of driving growth on a month-on-month basis, or in terms of acquiring a certain amount of logos, or driving revenues, or driving a certain amount of effectiveness in terms of your cost, whether it's cost per acquisition, cost per lead, etc. So I think with those 3 things at the core heart of sales transformation, I mean, let me quickly talk about some of the pain points that we are hearing from our customers. And these customers, as I mentioned earlier, are both digital native organizations, such as the logos that you are seeing over here, but at the same time, a lot of traditional enterprise organizations which are also on the journey to transform their sales and customer acquisition process. So let me quickly talk about some of the pain points that we are hearing in the market. I think one of the largest pain point that we hear is customers really wanting to leverage digital to drive a significant amount of growth. And this obviously means investments in channels that they're not traditionally invested in. This means putting in marketing dollars behind campaigns. This means obviously running campaigns across whether it's social media, whether it's web, whether it's email, whether it's SMS. And they would want a portion of the revenues coming through this digital channel. But more often than not, I think what's really critical for a lot of the client organization that we talk to is how is my how are my returns optimized when I'm spending X dollars on my marketing? Am I getting an adequate ROI for me to keep investing and reinvesting in those efforts? And what we would really like to see is not just look at marketing as just as a brand building exercise, which has been happening maybe several decades back, but now it's a very important channel where people would like to see a line of sight in terms of what those channels are really doing in terms of acquiring customers, and right to the time that they become paying customers for the enterprises. And as part of that, I think it's very important that organizations also want to understand what has been the customer journey, how people are buying across multiple channels. And I'll give you a simple example. We have a client, one of the client, which is into business of selling travel insurance. Now they have a unique problem that when you are selling travel insurance policies, the customer could come from any channels. I mean, customer could come from, they could look at they could come to your website potentially and do research on the policies that you are selling, or they could potentially click on a link on a Facebook campaign or in Google AdWord, or they could potentially directly call the call center. And the deal could also potentially get closed across any of these channels. I mean, they could have researched something on the website, but could potentially close and buy the policy, with the help of an inside sales rep or a call center rep. Now, while it's an omni-channel in nature, the key challenge that we also saw for this customer was that the entire purchase process or the buying process has to happen within minutes and at best in hours, because if you're not able to understand the customer journey across all these channels, and if you're not able to offer the right value proposition to them and being able to close the deal, the chances are that customer would have potentially even flown out and would have potentially purchased this the same product from other competitor of yourself. So it's very important to understand the customer journey, right from awareness to action. And in some cases, this awareness to action journey is happening in a matter of minutes and hours rather than days and weeks or months. The second challenge that we have heard very often from our clients is again because of the need to drive growth. Most of the companies are investing heavily on a very large field force. As companies try to expand into newer geographies, newer regions, and adjacent segments. This is one of the first investments that they would want to see and return on, right? But at the same time, while a lot of client of ours have, in some cases, hundreds of sales reps, and in some cases even thousands of sales reps, they don't have necessarily an visibility into how the sales reps are spending time on the field. Are they spending time on the most important deals or leads? And then many of this field force may not even be a full-time, employee in the organization. They could potentially be either a contract employee or potentially or working on an incentivized model who do not show up in office every day. So they would want to know, when they are checking in, which location they are present. They would want to know, are they working on the most effective or important deals? Are they converting those deals in the most appropriate manner? So that's another important pain point, and that pain point gets multiplied by a very large factor, given the large field force or the sales force that a lot of these organizations are investing in. The other issue that we also see is that because of the competitive nature, especially in the B2C industries, when you are selling a lending product or a banking offering or an insurance product, or when you are selling education enrollment, so whether you are selling travel and hospitality product, we are talking about some of those industry verticals which are very competitive. And it's very important that the organizations are able to drive efficiency, and more importantly the sales efficiency, in terms of getting the right matrix in terms of cost of acquiring that customer across, and then optimizing their channels across marketing, inside sales, and field sales. So that's another problem that we keep hearing in the market. And last but not the least, I mean, a lot of our client organizations have wonderful marketing departments which are able to create a very large volume of leads, or potentially even a very large volume of marketing qualified leads. But the issue that tends to happen is, the win rates, when those MQLs flow into SQLs, the win rates at times tend to be very low, which again defeats the economics, as well as it also it defeats the advantage that the digital channel is really offering. So how do you ensure that once the entire leads moves into the funnel, there is zero lead leakage, there is much better oversight on the conversion, there is much better execution processes happening in terms of in terms of not only the sales reps attention, but also the sales managers and the sales leadership teams oversight on the pipeline as well. So these are some of the 3 or 4 problems that we hear, and obviously the organization's response, right, to some of these problems cannot be one dimensional. In the sense that there are many of these problems which could potentially be addressed through technology, but then some of these problems also requires one to think about, are they having the right sales structure? Are they incentivizing their sales teams appropriately? Are they segmenting their customers appropriately? Are they focused on the right market? Are they working with the channel partners in a seamless manner? And hence the requirement of a sales transformation, because the moment you try to address any of these problems using one dimension of either people, process, technology, or better management processes, chances are that you would have overlooked many of the dimension in terms of solving those. So what we see from a sales transformation perspective, and this is just one of the framework. And again, there are multiple such frameworks that a lot of consulting organizations have brought to the table, but this is maybe one version of it in terms of how can one really attack the problems that we saw earlier, and what are all the different levers that one can really pull to be able to holistically make the entire sales organization a lot more effective, and at the end of the day drive performance, which is performance in terms of the revenue and growth. So at the heart of it, or if I were to look at this as a pyramid model, the underlying foundation has always been getting the right sales strategy and the right sales organization in place. So what kind of skill sets are you really having within the sales organization? What kind of incentive structure are you really putting together? How is one driving cross-functional alignment between sales and marketing goals? And I think one of the keywords which I keep hearing in the market is more sales and marketing, which tends to be at times at crossroads with each other, or in some cases even competing with each other, is more of a collaborative approach. And the word that I heard is marketing, which is sales and marketing really coming together. So that obviously forms the foundational layer in terms of driving any sales transformation exercise. And this is an area which obviously a lot of advisory firms, whether it is Big 4 or Big 3 firms, have been able to bring to the table to make a multifold impact on clients, on the outcomes. But I think the area where we play a role, and I think which is pretty much all other areas other than that underlying foundational alignment and structure, is the whole process transformation, as well as the entire technology-enabled process transformation. And an area where we focus on is obviously the first piece is, at the end of the day, you have to bring in leads, you have to bring in deals, and you have to show improvement in each of those areas on a week-on-week basis and a month-on-month basis. So what are those areas, right? Largely, your ability to run campaigns across multiple channels and running those campaigns in the most effective manner, and keeping your sight on traffic, on conversion, on cost of acquisition. I think those are very important areas, again, where a technology-enabled tool like LeadSquared can play a very, very effective role. The second piece is marketing automation, and I think this as a term, while it got popularized by multiple technology companies, ranging from HubSpot to marketers, I think we were doing marketing automation, at a time when it was not even called marketing automation, which was largely to put and get a top of the mind share of the customers, and ensure that you are having the right amount of workflows put in place so that you are engaging with the customers in the most automated manner, and understanding their behaviors across multiple channels. The third piece, which I believe is where a country like India, where there is a very large population of field sales rep, and where one can really make a large impact, is sales automation. And again, this as a category is something that we as LeadSquared are really creating in the market, and which really doesn't exist, which is and the most important part of any sales transformation exercise is execution, because most of the traditional CRM which we have been seeing over the last 3 decades typically focuses on system of records, which is getting the customer database correct and having all the insights about the customer. But the where the rubber hits the road is where the execution is really happening, and this is an area where it's all about ensuring that not a single opportunity is missed in the organization. There is activity task happening in the most regimented manner within the organization, and there is an oversight and performance management and monitoring, and you are at the same time taking away the entire burden of sales rep having to understand which is the most important deal to work on, or which is the most important account or customer to work on, by funneling and giving them the right information at the right point in time. And then that's the magic of sales automation. So I think this is an important element of any sales transformation exercise. The other piece which plays a very important role in a lot of sales transformation exercises is and again, I'm coming from a consulting background, and one of the first things that most consulting organizations do is really understand, what is the lead to cash process really look like, where the breakdowns are really happening. Are there issues just in terms of getting the right right leads into the system, or are there issues more focused on conversion? Are there issues around a product market fit, or are there issues around segmentation? And this is where one really needs to look at the entire lead to cash process and rethink how that process could really look like in a technology enabled world. And we have obviously put in some specific names of the process over here, whether it is about lead acquisition, lead distribution, campaign management process, account management process, customer service process, so on and so forth. And this is where technology will play a very central role in terms of rethinking and redesigning those processes. And the final 2 points around any sales transformation exercise is, at the end of the day, is again focused on having the right dashboards, having the right intelligence, and this can only happen when you are having a robust, robust data architecture. A lot of times, the sales execution system will need to talk to your backend system, which could be your loan origination system, right? If you are, for example, operating in a lending world, or it could require you to talk to your healthcare information system if you are in, let's say, in healthcare or in hospital space, or you could require to talk to ERP systems if you are, for example, in a manufacturing space. Now, it's very important that most of the sales systems are more microservices driven or API driven, and that they are able to talk to a lot of those system of records at the back, so that you are able to bring in the most relevant intelligence in a comprehensive and integrated manner. One simple example I'll give there is I mean, again, I'll take an insurance industry example, is renewals, for example. Renewals drive majority of the revenue growth, as well as it also drives the retention is a very important matrix for most insurance companies, whether it is health or life or any other. I mean, it could even be automobile insurance, and that's where one needs to look at what kind of policies is my existing customer having, and this would obviously sit in their core insurance system of record. And you need to bring that information and understand, when is the renewal due, and then start engaging with the customer to ensure that they don't churn from your organization and move to any other competing organization, and that you are able to renew and potentially even upsell or even cross-sell your offerings to that particular customer. So that integration, again, with your right system of records is an extremely important point. So let me. I think we are about 25 minutes into the webinar. I think we have 20 more minutes. So let me. What I'll do is I'll take 5 minutes each to walk through each of those cases that we are talking about, and how can you, if you are driving an internal transformation, or if you're driving a transformation for your client, how you can really leverage LeadSquared in each of these areas, and then enable transformation in a holistic manner for your organization or for your clients. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, this is an example of the first point, which is how can you run effective campaigns, how you can understand the customer journey across multiple channels. And today's customer, as you can see on the left-hand side of this chart, and this is an example of a retail customer, who can engage with you over, in a physical store environment, who can engage with you over, over your website or on mobile apps, or potentially even engage with you on social media, could potentially maybe call, make a phone call or chat, and then there are increasingly more and more channels. I mean, you are talking about WhatsApp, you're talking about chatbots, email, etc., right? And then obviously the last but not the least is at times even the home delivery. Now you can see that there is, even before the customer shows up at a store, at times there are a number of steps that the customer is doing in terms of researching about the product, and let's say if you are in a fashion industry, again it becomes a very important point that the 70% of the decisions are already made before the customer even ends up in your physical store. So how are you able to track that journey in terms of what they are doing, and how are you able to engage with the customer so that you are sending the right, you're first of all understanding the behavior in terms of their choice of channel to engage with your enterprise. At the same time, not only after understanding the behavior, really leveraging those channels to be able to ensure that you are able to continue that engagement, and then move across the entire IDA life cycle, right? So right from awareness to interest to decision and finally action. So that becomes an important point, and I think one can really map this entire end-to-end customer journey across channels. I think is no longer, nice to have, but it's an imperative. You have to understand the customer journey across multiple channels, and understanding that behavior, one really needs to trigger off the right sales and marketing processes from an automation perspective to be able to engage with the customers at a scale. So I'll just talk about quickly, in terms of how LeadSquared does this. I mean, LeadSquared today, for example, is a omni-channel, multi-channel customer journey understanding tool, and we are able to do this, across, some of the names over here are just for illustrative purpose, but the list is much bigger. I mean, one can really understand the customer journey in terms of what AdWords are they clicking on, what kind of Facebook campaigns are they really registering on, to also what kind of aggregator websites that they are visiting. For example, if you are an education institute and your customers are, let's say, students who might be researching about your institute and your courses that you offer on a website like Siksha or College Dunia, you need to be able to understand the journey and then being able to capture the sources through those third-party aggregator websites as well, and that's something that we do seamlessly. And one can also understand the customer journey, in terms of the calls that they're making or the calls that they're receiving and the email campaigns to which they're responding. So all of this is possible, on a tool like LeadSquared. I'm sure there are a few other tools in the market where it's possible as well. But this is something which is very important, and it's a starting point of any transformation exercise, that one needs to be able to understand the customer journey even before they made their decision or move towards interest area. So the second point over here is, one thing is understanding the customer journey, but the other thing is also, creating, meaningful automations out of it, because, it's again, your traditional CRM has always been a system of record, which would record all these activities. But then the sales execution systems and the sales automation systems are the ones which acts on all those signals. So we'll give a very simple example. One of our edtech companies, they have a mobile app which is being used by students of all ages. And one of the first things that the parents of those students, who are actually the customers of our clients, they do is download a free app. And once they download a free app, there's multiple free content which is available, for their kids to really watch on that particular app. And I think this is a very important signal for you to understand how engaged are the students, how engaged are the parents, and using that signal, you can decide whether the potential customer is a hot, warm, or cold lead. And accordingly, you can then trigger off and pass that lead to a counselor or to an inside sales representative, and you can effectively decide whether we should be making a call, whether they should be scheduling some meeting, or whether it's a really cold lead and you need to put it through maybe a 40-step nurture sequence process to be able to engage and then bring them into a stage where they are looking to make a purchase. So again, this is an important part in terms of automating. The one is obviously understanding the customer journey, but the second part is then using that information to be able to then execute your right sales and marketing process. And again, that's something which is really possible with a technology platform like LeadSquared. The third piece, I think, which is very important, is automation. We all are increasingly seeing, and we are increasingly living in a world of hyper automation. We have all heard of RPA, I mean robotics process automation, for example, which could enable a lot of repetitive tasks based on simple if then else condition across multiple technology platforms. We have a very similar automation capability available right inside our tool, which doesn't require anyone to bring in the technology knowledge or have the coding experience. I mean, this is as simple as like creating a visual flow diagram where one can create simple automation. Like if a customer is visiting your website and you want to thank them for filling up, an inquiry form, and then telling them that, hey, someone from my, inside sales team will give you a call within the next 2 hours, I think goes a long way in terms of initiating, a relationship which was otherwise very cold. And then at the same time, creating a task, for your agent to make a call, and then ensuring that if the agent has not called, then ensuring that it either gets passed on to the other agent who is available or gets escalated to their manager. It's just ensuring that you are not only automating the process, and at the same time you are providing a very compelling customer experience, and across channels and across the channels of customers' preference as well. So this is again very pivotal, that one should be able to do this at a scale. In especially in B2C industries, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of customers, and you can engage and you can only provide the right compelling experience if you have those automation capabilities available as well. So this again goes a very long way in terms of driving the sales transformation within any organization. So I'll quickly move on to the second point, which is the first thing that we talked about. This is how you can acquire the customers, drive digital growth, and provide them with the right compelling experience, and also automate your sales process and tasks. The second thing that we will come to and talk about is sales effectiveness. A lot of traditional problem statements had always been focused on measuring effectiveness of a sales rep or a sales team, and then tracking their activity, in terms of what they are doing on the field. Are they working on the right opportunities or not? And 8 out of 10 CRM implementations, which focused on tracking the sales activity, failed because the sales team really doesn't like an overhead in terms of filling in extra information, and maybe opening their laptops at the end of the day, and they becoming more like your clerks rather than being focused in front of the customers and focused on selling activities, right? So I think this is, while it's always recognized as an area of improvement, the challenge has always been in terms of how do you measure, monitor sales effectiveness, and how do you aid a sales rep rather than creating more additional overhead activities for that particular sales rep. So this is something which is possible, and with LeadSquared, which allows a sales rep to do almost 100% of his or her activities on the mobile phone, and majority of those activities are done in an automated manner. For example, if they were making a phone call to a customer, and if that lead is already present in the system, they don't have to record saying I made a extra phone call. Or if they received a phone call from the customer, it automatically gets recorded, and that the customer is also super engaged with this particular sales rep, and you also have an intelligence in terms of that the likelihood of potentially that deal closing is much higher, than compared to someone making a call where the customer is not even picking up the phone. So all of these activities being done on mobile phone, I think, is a great help. Second is a lot of location related activities and transformation. So for example, if I'm a sales rep, one of the things which I would want to know, saying which are the 5 meetings that I have to do in a day, and how can my route potentially be optimized. So this is an activity which would actually help me, rather than me feeling that hey, someone is just overlooking me in terms of which location am I really present in as a sales rep. And then the additional advantage is, once you connect this to your customer journey process, you can potentially increase the agility in your business as well. And I'll give one very simple example coming in from a company which is selling credit cards. And what they do is, if I have a sales rep which is present in Kandivali West, for example, which is a region in Mumbai, and I have a customer, a lead which was already in my system, which was not engaged, but now visiting my website and potentially again doing inquiry on credit card again, I can real time pass that lead to that particular person and say, hey, why don't you make a call to this prospect and potentially even make a visit while you are in that particular region itself. So again, it's a combination of dual impact of improving the customer experience, at the same time, really turbocharging your sales force productivity as well, and also enabling my sales rep to meet his or her quota requirement in a much more effective manner, especially in a place where we are all harassed by traffic in some of the urban parts of India, whether it's Mumbai, Delhi, Bengaluru, etc. So that's another piece which will become very important. The second part of sales effectiveness, and again, everyone's talking about it, we have already made this happen, which is driving sales intelligence. Now, sales intelligence in a traditional CRM world always meant that, hey, I need to have a 360-degree view of my customer, and a lot of CRM tools actually enabled that you can view their professional history of a target customer. You can potentially view their LinkedIn profile. You can view all the activity that they've done. You can potentially view, all the products that your customer has purchased, yada yada yada. But I think the sales rep who is out there in the field, he's actually not looking for more information. He's actually looking for very specific targeted information, and that's where intelligence really comes into picture. So the way the intelligence that we have built out is focused on next best action. So if I'm a sales rep, and I don't need to necessarily know all the history and profile of my target customer, but if I know that, hey, if the chances of closing a particular deal is best in terms of the system suggesting me, saying which next action that I should be taking for the deal to move forward or the deal to potentially close, that's the information I really value. So it's about less information being sent to the sales rep, but a very targeted information based on all the churning which happens in the back end, in terms of looking at the matching of the sales rep to the opportunity path, or the golden path as it is called, looking at the customer's propensity to buy, etc., right? So this is where, again, the sales intelligence will play a very important role. And again, here, while few things we have already built out, but again, there is no limitation to what you as an internal organization can build as well, on top of all the data that we provide, as well as some of the partners who can build out more complex models, more complex algorithms and AI engines to ensure that your forecast accuracy of ability to close a deal increases on a month-on-month basis again. So this is another area which is playing a very important role in sales transformation as well. The third piece is, and I think we have partly covered this, which is sales automation. And again, the sales automation, there are multiple use cases, but one needs a platform where you can create the right automation depending on your business requirement. So we just, for example, had a meeting with one of the very large real estate companies here in Mumbai, and one of their requirement is to ensure that they are passing on the leads to their sales rep based on the income segmentation of the potential customer. So they have projects, for example, which are in super luxury segment as well, and they have projects which are also in affordable housing. And they have a very different sales team meeting the requirements for both the segments. And one is able to do that automation, without a requirement for a sales analyst or a sales operation person, or for that matter, even a sales manager. Based on the criteria that you have chosen, the right deals go to the right person, for follow-ups and closure. So again, this is one simple example, but you can create, multiple nodes of automation and more complex automation depending on the business that you are really in. So I think I'll move on to the third piece, which we touched upon earlier, which is the sales technology itself. And as I mentioned, when you look at entire sales technology stack, we are talking about multiple layers within that sales stack. So at the back end, most of us are familiar with the system of records, and these are all traditional ERP system or traditional CRM system, which would house multiple information about transactions, about in some cases even the customer history, and potentially a lot of other financial and accounting system. But I think what you need on top is a very solid system of engagement and system of execution, which basically mines and leverages that information, and then focuses on working on that particular deal, and then converting that deal into a qualified deal, and then finally into a customer. And then finally on top of that, you need obviously the system of intelligence, which basically could create models, and the example that we talked earlier was the artificial intelligence models like next best action and golden path, which you can leverage on a repetitive basis and improve it over a period of time as well. So what you really need from a sales transformation perspective is you take a holistic view across this entire sales technology stack, and then you create systems which are more microservices driven, API driven, which would basically exchange data more seamlessly, rather than investing, or if you have a legacy monolithic system, then you need to start breaking down into different components, and then start looking at so that you have the flexibility and innovation in each of those components, rather than trying to focus to solve the entire big stack problem on your own. Last but not the least, I'm just cognizant of time as well. So I think last but not the least is the performance management. And I think if you are looking at a sales transformation, again, your objectives could be very different. I mean, we have heard sales transformation where the objective at times was focused on and this is the case with a lot of new age startup digital native organization, which is just build out the traffic, increase the awareness at a scale. Whereas for a lot of organizations which are getting into adolescent stage, as well as which are getting into more mature stage, the focus is more on engagement and conversion. And then as you grow further, the focus shifts at times to retention, reducing churn, and driving growth, and getting converting your customers into promoters as well. So, and in some cases, it's a combination of all of this. Now, whatever your goals are, it's very important that you have visibility into data, into reporting, and so that you are able to understand where your transformation exercise at a certain point in time needs to really focus on. And again, this is possible only if you have systems which are able to give almost a streaming data, because of the velocity of business that we're talking about these days, and something which again works very well with your traditional system of records as well. So we have put up some of the traditional metrics that we ourselves track as well over here within LeadSquared. And something that a lot of these reports also come out of the box from our system. So I'm just showing you a summary of kind of reports which one can really see whether it is focused on marketing side or on the sales side, but one can really get a handle on down to the task level. Are any of my tasks getting missed? Are there any customers who are not receiving a follow-up call? Are there any customers who have raised a support ticket or a support request? Are they not getting really addressed? Am I able to track how quickly my lead stages are moving from one stage to another stage? So this report is reporting set is like an ammunition, and one needs to consider this as an integral part of the sales transformation exercise. So I'll move on to the last 2 slides, and then we will open up for questions. So what do we bring to the table? So us as LeadSquared, I mean, we are at the end of the day a technology platform which can do these 4 things as an enabler for any of the sales transformation exercise. So the first thing that we do is multi-channel and integrated lead nurturing, and giving you the view in terms of the customer engagement across multiple channels. We also have a mobile CRM solution which allows you to which is intuitive, lightweight, which sales users really like to use, and which is solving their problems rather than just monitoring what their activities are. and something that they are able to do most of their activity on a day-to-day basis. Not only the customer-facing activities, but also some of the other administration activities, whether it is onboarding a particular customer or doing their KYC or uploading a certain set of documents, etc. And the third piece which we do is allowing you to create any sales automation that one would really need to be able to create a productivity at a scale within the organization. Now, obviously, what those automations should look like, I mean, is at the end of the day will come from your domain, your business understanding, and some of the industry best practices. But that's an element that we enable from a technology standpoint. And the last piece, I mean, the combination of all of this, right, is basically the performance management and monitoring. Now, I have one last slide, and this is specifically for the partner community, and more specifically even the advisory community, that when they go out in the market, right, and when the clients talk about saying, hey, we have a sales problem to solve, and we are looking at a comprehensive help or an exercise to drive a transformation exercise, what does that typical phases and stages really look like? And typically, one of the first phase that most, whether you are an internal consultant or an external consultant, that one would really do is get a handle on where the problem areas are. And the problem areas could start from, looking at an outcome matrix, saying, which are the campaigns which are most effective, where is, which regions are the best performing regions for me, which sales reps are the best performing sales reps for me, classifying them into ABC category, looking at which product segments are the most effective for me, where are my, white spaces, etc. Now, this is obviously requires you to understand, the domain and the client to share a lot of the data, but this is obviously one of the steps that any organization can do. And the second piece is really looking at the enablers. And this is an area where we could help a lot, which is saying, what kind of reporting are you having? What are the KPIs that you are measuring? What are the KPIs that you are making people accountable to? Can the system really measure all the KPIs that we really want to? What does your lead to order process maturity really look like? I think doing a short but very sharp assessment like this can really identify the problem statement areas very, very well, and allow you to focus on solving those problem areas for your client organization. And then the role that we typically play is beyond phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, which is where if you want to reimagine the entire lead to order process, what role can technology play as part of reimagining that particular process? Again, we can help both the internal as well as external organization. We can help in terms of looking at saying whether you should look at a best fit model or whether you should look at a suite model. What kind of data architecture you would need to be able to drive your reporting requirements, and finally, what is the business case? Ultimately, all of this will focus on saying, if I were to make changes to my business process, if I were to make changes to my system, if I were to make changes to my organization, what is the benefit that I'm going to get, and what investments would I be expected to make? And then from an execution standpoint, really what really needs to start while you are doing all this design and implementation is starting with an MVP approach, which is to say, hey, why don't we change this approach on a small set of campaigns or small set of customers or small set of sales reps, and really start seeing whether it's working or not. And once you get confidence, you really build out the scale and then expand it to wave 2 and wave 3. But at the same time, some of the other changes which would typically take longer, such as system or potentially doing the change management or training or realignment of KPIs, that's something that you start doing in parallel. Again, this is not one size fits all approach, but this is an approach that we have seen working very well in sales transformation exercise, especially with the clients that we work with. With this, I know it's been a sort of a very rapid and fast webinar that I've taken you through this, but we'll be happy to take questions, and I'll open up the forum to questions. And maybe Shivani, if you're already starting to get questions on the chat, feel free to start popping that up. I think we have another 5 to 7 more minutes that we can take.
Sure, Malay, there are quite a few questions, and thanks so much for a very comprehensive session. So a couple of you have already answered your questions about campaigns. We do not create campaigns, but we will help you manage them. Thereafter, we can of course recommend agencies, our partner agencies, who will be able to help you out with that. So just look out for my email after this session. I'll connect you to some. I will start off with Dr. Pratima's questions. Hi, Dr. Pratima. She's a regular webinar attendee. That's what I've noticed so far. So Dr. Pratima's question is how to use business intelligence for pitching sales using digital platforms for a service related to mix of innovative and need-based ideas. Given the potential customer are higher educational organizations, not individuals.
Okay, so if I understand the question, Shivani, I think the question that Dr. Pratima is having is, how do you pitch to an education customer, leveraging, let's say the data which may be available on the sales, from a sales system perspective. Is that fair to put it that way, or maybe you can just rephrase that for me as well one more time?
Yes, I believe that's what it is. Dr. Pratima, if you want, you can elaborate on your question. But yes, she's talking about pitching sales using digital platforms, and the potential target customer here are educational organizations. But how to use business intelligence, essentially.
How to use business intelligence? Yeah. So again, and I'll try to answer this question, to the extent which I understood. But I think, if you were to really look at business intelligence and pitching to education organization, I think one of the big problems that education organizations today are having is focused on enrollments. The enrollments, whether you look at higher education, whether you look at, I think is declining. I mean, across the globe. I mean, obviously, in India we have a very, education is a booming industry right now in countries like India and China. But across the globe, the education is enrollments are declining. And I think the key challenge there is obviously there are multiple choices that most consumers are having in terms of choosing the courses, choosing the place where they want to study. And we also have a very large, consortium of, or rather large population or a cohort of students who are also studying internationally as well. So I think for most education institutes, I mean, if I have to look at higher education institutes, one of the big challenges that most of these organizations are having around student acquisition. And if you are able to drive campaigns in a most optimal manner to be able to acquire students, to be able to engage students, to be able to understand their preferences. And I'll give one simple example that people are even preferring to put applications over Instagram rather than preferring to do this over the traditional form fill out model, right? And we are talking about 62% of the applications getting digitized as well. So I think a lot of this education organization, if you are able to solve that as a particular problem in terms of where the drop-offs are happening and how you can analyze their traditional data in terms of accelerating your enrollments from an admission perspective, I think that could be a massive benefit. The other thing from an intelligence perspective that one really needs to look at is really targeting, and enabling your counselors and the administrators within the education institutes, that they need to be able to have the right information about the students that they're counseling and at what point in time they are in the journey. And I think if you are able to provide those right tools, including the intelligence in terms of what those students' history really looks like and where they are in the entire process, I think that could be another big benefit as well. So I think those are a couple of things that I could think of. I mean, obviously there are multiple use cases from a sales intelligence perspective, which I touched upon earlier. But these are the two things which I can think of from an educational institute perspective.
Right. So people are now wanting use cases from their business or their industry type. So Girish is talking about the healthcare scenario. How do we look at this from the healthcare scenario from lead to order?
Okay. So, I mean, healthcare, obviously, different countries have different models of healthcare. I mean, the good thing about India is, healthcare is a consumer product as opposed to a payer-led industry in some of the other Western countries, right? So I think if you were to look at India, I mean, the use case of healthcare would still be to understand, the patient engagement and even the patient acquisition across multiple channels. patients obviously would like to interact, and again they have, as I mentioned earlier, also a lot of the prospective patients have already made up a decision in terms of which healthcare provider do they want to engage, and specifically even within that healthcare setting, which doctor to engage, etc. as well. So I think knowing their preferences, understanding their journey, I think becomes an important element. Is one part. The second part is then once they are in your primary setting. I mean, and especially when we are talking about use cases such as chronic diseases, one can potentially engage with those patients through a lifelong services as well, and then keeping a track and enabling them across that entire life cycle, again, is a very important use case that one can really consider. And last but not the least, just purely from a healthcare organization perspective, when they want to optimize their offerings for a particular patient, they want to look at outpatient to inpatient conversion, they want to look at outpatient to pharmacy conversion, they want to look at outpatient to diagnostic conversion. So I think you are able to track that much better, again, if you are having all of that information integrated in one single system of engagement. Most of the traditional HIS tools, which are which are all good system of records, are not able to do that. But if you have a good system of engagement and execution, then you are able to map that conversion and the journey much better, and also being able to provide the right kind of experience and service for your patients.
All right. So please don't get upset if I'm not taking your questions. I'm just taking them in the order they've come. There are quite a few questions here, so I'm just gonna get on with it. Malay, the next question's on implementing or initiating a sales transformation process of sorts. So Preeti's asking, so what sort of timelines are we looking at, in terms of duration, and also what sort of budgets do you keep aside for this?
Yeah, so again, the timelines are function of how big and how severe the problem is, and how urgent, and in what areas are those problems present in, right? I mean, and then again, at times the transformation is also a very scary word at times to use. So one of the best approaches that I've seen that a lot of consulting organizations use in the market is solve the most urgent or the burning platform, right? So that problem could change from month on month or quarter to quarter. But let's say if you have an issue around lead leakage, for example, that your sales reps are not acting on the leads which, let's say, marketing is feeding to them. I think that's one area that one can quickly fix through both the process intervention and a technology intervention, and then you can potentially move on to the other piece. Maybe the other areas that you need to fix is better sales culture. You may need to fix. You may want to get the right talent in within your organization. You may want to do the right amount of training, etc. So all those elements will obviously make your transformation really stick and the change stick as well. But the best way to approach a transformation is to not even call it transformation, but really start small, solve a problem, and then look at it holistically, and then address other parts of the problem. So I think holistically, if you were to look at if the organization is a multi-country, multifunctional, multi-product kind of a business, and you are looking at transforming sales at a global scale, right? Then we are talking about at least 12 to 18 months. Is something which would really take for you to make all the changes, including the system changes as well. But as I mentioned, one can always start small, show the benefits. That also makes your business case a lot more stronger, and that's something that you can then build on to make your transformation overall successful.
All right. The next question is from Aarti. So she says, what sort of partnership opportunities do you offer or have?
So I'm not sure, Shivani, if Sridhar is there. Sridhar is our head of alliances and partnership. Maybe that's something that if Sridhar can just maybe talk about that very briefly, I think maybe I'll let him answer that question. Shivani, if that's possible. If not, then I can answer that briefly as well.
Sure. Sridhar, are you around?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello, everyone. This is Sridhar here. Thanks for the small intro, Malay. Shivani, correct me if I'm wrong, but Aarti's question was, what are the kind of partnerships we offer, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So primarily, we are looking at building a slew of partners around four key pillars. One of this, the first pillar is a referral partner network, where we are looking at organizations who would like to not possibly get engaged in detail in the whole sales process, but would like to still bring certain, add value to their customer relationships by referring a product which they feel can benefit their customer. This is one of the partnerships we're looking at, where you don't have to engage in the sales process or the implementation. You simply refer a lead to LeadSquared, and we take it further from there. The second kind of partnerships we're looking at are broadly around technical integrations and alliances for joint go-to-markets. So you could be from an organization which possibly has another enterprise software, which when integrated with LeadSquared offers a better end solution to the end customer and benefits both our organizations to kind of bring some new customers on board as well. So that is an alliance partner relationship that we're looking at. The third kind of partners we look at are the system integrator partners. Primary system integrator partners are organizations which act as an extended sales and implementation arm of LeadSquared. So this SI partner will not just sell, but also implement the LeadSquared solution for their customers across various industry verticals. And they will also be able to add to the LeadSquared solution from their specific skill set or from their specific industry practice, whatever IP they might have built out. That is something that they can add on top of LeadSquared as well to service their customers. And fourth, the other kind of partners we're looking at is the consulting and the advisory partners. These are primarily consulting organizations looking for engagements, looking for solutions for their clients or prospective clients in the marketplace, and we would like to align with the consulting partners to build that relationship with their end clients jointly as well. Of course, there are different ways of rewarding the partners across each of these partner tiers. And if you're interested, please write into us, and we can get into a detailed discussion on how the commission structures and margins and benefits and support system looks like for each of these tiers as well. I hope that answers the question, Shivani.
Yes, perfect, Sridhar. Thank you. Aarti, if you have any follow-up questions, please do ask. I'm afraid we will have to end the session because it is past 4, but a lot of you actually have questions very specific to your business and your type of industry. So I think that would require a longer and more detailed answer. So I will connect you to specialists in our organization who are handling, let's say, telecom, because I see a telecom question here, finance, healthcare, and so on. I can probably take a last question from James. So, Malay, James says, are there any organizations or companies that you see who are sort of driving sales transformation really well? Do you have any examples that you can share of any instances that you've seen?
Yeah, I think obviously there are quite a lot of organizations out there in the market, and I talked about Big Four, organizations who work very closely with their clients in terms of solving variety of problems around sales, as well as Big Three organizations as well. So I think those are obviously known names in the market, but I think more critical than just the brand names, I think is an organization which really understands the client's business very well, which understands the domain, and which also has an appreciation of the challenges that they're going through, and also an appreciation across multiple different facets, right? So it's not just about the process or the system, but also about the people, about the culture, about the performance incentive, etc. So I think to that extent, any even a small time vendor partner who may be working with a client organization in advisory capacity may also be a lot more capable. But I think that understanding of their client business is very important. But otherwise, Big Four, Big Three are obviously quite a known name out there in the market, and I'm sure there will be other boutiques as well which would be doing a phenomenal work in sales transformation area.
Okay, and just because it's related to this question, I'm just going to take up Chandrasekhar's question. So he says, small scale industries, they don't really have a robust architecture. So what sort of suggestions would you give them to succeed in sales?
Yeah, I think that's and I'm sorry, Shivani, I may have to take this as the last question. We are on the top of the hour as well, but
yes,
I think I'll take this question because I think the great thing about today's cloud environment and a software as a service environment is that one really doesn't need to invest in hardware and in terms of creating your own stack. I mean, you can practically sign up and start using the software, and then all those capabilities are available to you at the click of the button, right? So I mean, everything is taken care, because everything from hosting to managing automations to having the integrations, etc., all of them can work at a cloud scale. I think if you are more specifically interested in terms of looking like what that stack, sales technology stack in cloud really looks like, and what are the 2, 3, 4 different potentially technology components or companies that you need to bring together, we'll be happy to advise you on that side. But I don't think SSI have any barrier to compete, and in fact they would do much better, because they would be leapfrogging relative to their the traditional large enterprise players who have got more bigger difficulty in terms of moving into the new technology stack world.
All right, thank you so much. And like Malay said, we will have to end the session now, because I know a lot of you have other commitments. So thanks so much for joining the session. A couple of things before you leave. The presentation will be shared. A lot of you have asked for that. So yes, and a lot of them have also complimented the presentation. So thanks so much, Malay. And finally, even the recording will be shared. Those of you who have questions on partnership, on any other questions, there are quite a few questions that we've missed out. Don't worry, we will address them. They'll also be taken care of. So just email me at shivani.roy@leadsquared.com, or just respond to the webinar email and you'll get me. Those of you are asking for marketing on a thin budget, or marketing for smaller businesses who don't have a big budget, we are doing a webinar tomorrow on marketing on a thin budget. So please do join that. Again, just respond to my email and I'll sign you up for that. Lastly, for customers who are here, LeadSquared customers, we have a webinar on forms and processes next week. So I hope to see you for that. Thanks so much, Malay. Thanks so much, Sridhar, for your time. And thanks so much to the audience. See you guys. Bye-bye. Take care. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.